Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. We're just going to give it time for a couple more people to get into the webinar today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, good morning and thank you all for participating in today's exciting webinar, Online Reviews 101. I am Jenny Tepesky, the Programming and Communications Manager here at the Better Business Bureau Midwest Plains. I am so happy that you have taken the time out to participate in this webinar with us. With that, I just wanted to remind everyone, check out our website, bbbinc.org, in regards to all of our future upcoming events. We are so grateful to have Myra, the Executive Vice President of the Review Solution with Third Coast Interactive, with us this morning. Myra oversees the company's overall strategies and initiatives by working closely with global brands, collaborating with national associations and organizations that are composed of business and business owners, and managing the partnership with the Better Business Bureau. Today, Myra will be discussing how reviews can successfully impact a business, best practices requesting reviews, going over effective review tactics, and more. If you have any questions, we ask that you put them in the Q&A spot and we will get to those questions throughout the presentation. So with that, I welcome you and thank you, Myra.
Thank you, Jenny. And also thank you to the Better Business Bureau of the Midwest Plains for having me on this morning to talk to you all about the importance of online reviews. And so, as you can see, the name of the webinar is officially Online Reviews 101, and it's how to take control of your online reputation. And I think for a lot of businesses, essentially online reputation is inextricably linked with online reviews. Okay, why are online reviews important? So I typically get my stats. So there's two places that publish an annual report essentially on how consumers' behavior influence, how businesses look at online reviews. And so in this case, they haven't come out with the 2024 version yet. But this is from 2023. As you can see here from the Moz Local Business Review Survey Report, 96% of consumers are reading online reviews, and 86% say that reviews are important when deciding whether to trust a business. And so that's probably information that you, as somebody who owns a business or somebody who helps run a business, know instinctively, but it is nice to see the numbers associated with that. And as you can see, the overwhelming majority in both of those categories, obviously almost all consumers are reading online reviews. And from that 96%, also way over 3/4 of them are using online reviews to decide whether or not to trust a business. Okay. And as you can see here, not only are reviews in general important, but a lot of consumers actually care when a review was written. So it looks here, this is from Bright Local's Local Consumer Survey, and 93% of consumers care when a review was written. Now, when I'm presenting these stats, obviously they're from the perspective of the consumer, but I think as everybody on this webinar can agree, all business owners and everybody associated with the business are also consumers themselves. And so when I present these stats, this type of information and insights into consumer behavior, I think it's very helpful to compare that to your own behavior and your own tendencies and realize that you probably think very similarly to the consumers that I'm presenting today. And so again, when you think about your own behavior and how you look at customer reviews, you probably tend to give more weight to reviews that are written the most recently. So when you're looking at Google reviews or reviews in general online, you're probably not sorting, from oldest to newest and then reading reviews from 2 years ago. And I think it makes sense that people do care when a review is written because, as you all know, especially nowadays, a lot of changes can happen within a business that can fundamentally change that business, whether it's new management that changes the prices, maybe they're offering completely different products and services altogether, or their policies have changed, and that can make a huge difference in how a customer perceives that business. And so I just encourage you to think about, again, your own behavior when I'm presenting these stats. By the same vein, to me, what's very interesting is almost half of the consumers, surveyed here only pay attention to reviews written within the past month. So it's not even within the past 3 months or 6 months. It's almost 50% if it wasn't written within the last few weeks. They just don't give that much weight to it. And so I think that's important to keep in mind because it really drives home the point that it's not enough to, get a whole bunch of great reviews today, tomorrow, next week, and then not think about it the rest of the year. Because knowing that consumers care about recent reviews tells you that essentially continuing to get great feedback about your business for consumers to see online becomes a regular thing that you really have to pay attention to. Okay. And it goes without saying, obviously, that star rating matters. Again, these are the stats that I'm showing today. I don't think anybody's going to argue with the truth of them, but it is interesting to kind of see the percentages, right? So in this case, again, over 3/4 of consumers surveyed think it's important not only for a business to have great reviews and have a good star rating, but to actually have a higher star rating than the other businesses they're considering. And so again, think back to your own behavior, when you're researching, especially for businesses that it takes a little bit more to research before you decide to move forward. And, for a lot of people, that's contractors, right? Especially if you're having something done to your home or even to your business. Maybe you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 businesses from friends and family recommendations and things like that. And then you're just looking at their reviews online. Most likely you're going to go with the one, everything else being equal, that has a higher star rating than the other ones you're considering. So it's just interesting to keep in mind because that is something that I tell businesses that I talk to is, yes, it's great to look at your own business online and see what people see about your business online and what customer reviews you have online. But I encourage you to also look at your, most direct competitors, especially in the same area that you encompass, and see how they look online, because ultimately that's who you're in competition against, especially for the same pool of customers, right? So, and then going off of star rating mattering, you can see here 60%, so more than the majority, obviously, would only consider a business with a 4-star rating or higher. So if you look at that and you can see how that's visually represented in a lot of the review sites that you come across, a lot of times you don't actually see the numerical value until you look into more details. And so you just see 2, 3, 4, 5 stars filled in. And so I think in this case, even if you have a 3.9, which is really close to a 4-star, depending on the review site, that means you only have 3 stars filled in. And for the consumer mind, they see 2 empty stars and they just move on mentally. So I think it's really important to make sure, as best as you can, that your average star rating for a lot of these review sites remain above a 4-star. Otherwise, you're losing out on, 40% of your potential customer base. Okay. And then, and we'll talk about this later on. So we talked about, obviously, consumers read online reviews. They use reviews to determine whether or not they should even patronize a business. They compare businesses with their competitors. They want those businesses to have a higher star rating than the other businesses they're considering. They care about the recency of reviews. And now, as you can see here, 89% are also likely to use a business that responds to all reviews. This is definitely a more recent phenomenon. I would say maybe as recently as 5 years ago, while we obviously always encouraged businesses to respond to all of their reviews, I think it's only been within the last couple of years that consumers have also been paying attention to how businesses have been interacting with the online feedback that has been submitted about their business. And we'll talk about that later on in this webinar too, on how you can use that to your advantage as a business. And then this just shows that 70% read anywhere from 5 to 20 positive reviews before deciding that a business is worthy of consideration. And so I think this just shows you that for a lot of consumers, they're probably looking at several review sites to get those 5 or 20 positive reviews, especially if they're only considering reviews that were written in the past month, right? So maybe it's the 2 reviews on bbb.org, and they look at a handful on Google, and then maybe something, depending on what your industry is, maybe it's Yelp, maybe it's Angie, maybe it's Home Advisor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Okay. Now, the good news is, taking into consideration all the stats that I just presented, 86% of consumers say that they do write online reviews for businesses. And on top of that, more than half of your customers will actually always or usually write a review if you ask them. And to me, this stat right here is the most staggering, because 39% of consumers have, at least they state that they have not been directly asked to leave a review in the past 5 years. And so essentially, the businesses are relying on the customers to be proactive and want to write a review about them, and they have not asked directly. And so that's what we'll talk about today is, how to actually ask your customers for reviews, because as you can see, more often than not, if you're asking a customer for a review, they will go ahead and write a review for you. Okay, so I'll stop here. I know I threw a lot of information at you in a short period of time. See if anybody has any questions or comments about any of the stats I just presented. And let me drop in. I don't see any in the chat. Jenny, do you see anything?
No, not yet.
Great. Okay, so we'll go on to the next section of the webinar, which I think a lot of people hopefully get a lot of value from. And we talked about essentially how important reviews are. And if you ask for a review, you're essentially going to get one. So how do you ask for reviews? And here is just some tips and tricks that and best practices that I've compiled. I've been working with businesses on their online reviews for 12 years now. And through the years, based on feedback from businesses and just the results that we're able to get from helping them, these are kind of the tips that I have to offer for businesses. I would point out that a lot of this is easy to apply, especially if you are doing face-to-face business with your customers, and especially if you are kind of in home services industry contractors. But again, feel free to adapt any of these approaches in such a way that actually fits how you interact with your customers, right? So the number one thing I always stress is whenever you can, ask at the point of service, because that is when your customer is going to be the happiest with your product or service that you just provided. And again, I remind you to think about your own behavior. And just within the past week, think about all the different businesses that you probably interacted with in your day-to-day life. Maybe you got gas somewhere, maybe had lunch with a friend, grabbed dinner, went to the movies, had somebody over at your house to fix something. And think about all those businesses and employees of businesses that you interacted with, and how many of those interactions were positive. And if you're like most people, the vast majority of your interactions with businesses are going to be positive, right? Or at least neutral. So neutral to positive. And thinking about all of that, how many of those businesses that you had a positive experience with did you write a review for without being asked? You don't have to obviously say it out loud, but just think about it. And I think it comes down to, by and large, because the vast majority of our interactions with other businesses are positive, and we've come to expect, obviously, great service, or a product that is worth what we paid for it, that when those things happen, they're not notable. They don't stand out in our head. And so after you had lunch with a friend, maybe right after the lunch, okay, the food was great, the service was fantastic. You and your friend are talking about it and you're thinking about, wow, that was delicious food and I'll definitely go back. And the server was so courteous. But after that, you go on with your day and you're probably not thinking about it anymore, at least not to the sense that you will be willing to write a review for that business unless they ask you. Now, if maybe the server had come to your table and encouraged you to, if you enjoyed your experience here, or if there's something you want to share with us, please write a review online. Maybe that would have spurred you to write a review at that point, but you probably didn't feel or weren't compelled to do it after. And I think that's the issue here is if you're not asking at the point of service when people are the happiest, they're not necessarily going to do it on their own. Now, on the flip side, if you think about all the businesses that you've had an interaction with in the last month, the one or two that probably stand out among the rest are going to be the ones that you had less than stellar interaction with. So whether somebody was rude, or maybe you paid for a product or a service and you felt like you were ripped off, you're probably still thinking about that weeks later. And even if you didn't write a review right then and there at the point of service, if you're still upset about that particular interaction, you're probably more likely to write that review today about something that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. If it was negative, then, the positive interaction you had 2 days ago. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But again, that's why I always encourage asking at the point of service, because that's when your customer is going to be at the happiest. And that's when they're going to be the most likely to submit a review online. Okay. Now, I like this middle column here because I think it's a really good role play opportunity. And we have businesses that when they ask us to come in and talk to their employees, this is one of the things that we role play with them. And again, you can adapt this approach as needed. But I call this the perfect walk. And essentially, it goes something like this. So you've just finished a job for a customer. Let's say you just cleaned their carpets. Okay, I know that you did a great job. Their carpet looks great. You ask them, or you tell them, online reviews have become really important for businesses like mine. Would you mind leaving us a review? And they'll say yes or no. Most people will say yes just because you're asking them face to face. And then this is the part that's important. You let them write the review and you walk away. Now, this doesn't mean leaving, but go ahead, and what I always encourage, especially again, if you're in the home services industry, is go ahead and double check your work, right? Make sure everything does look good, meets your standards as a business. If you clean the carpets, make sure you're not leaving any of your equipment behind, or, you didn't leave a mess, or maybe there was a spot that you missed. So go ahead and double check everything that you actually did to give that person the opportunity to write you a review, so that by the time you get back to them, they've written you a review, but you haven't sat there or stood there and looked at them awkwardly. They haven't felt awkward or pressured to give you a particular type of review because you were watching them. So that's what I recommend, this approach. And obviously, there's something missing from this approach, because if you don't have a way for them to write you a review while you're walking away and examining everything, then it's not really that effective, right? And so this is kind of where the reviews app comes in, which I will be talking about later on in the webinar. But in terms of the structure of asking for a review, I definitely recommend the middle column, especially if you are the type of business that has that kind of interaction with your customers. Okay. And then the third thing is just in general, make asking for reviews a part of your company's process. I always say success comes from the top down. And if you make asking for reviews just part of your day-to-day procedures, you train all your new employees on it, they know exactly when they're supposed to ask for a review. it makes it really easy for them because they don't even have to think about it. And it makes it even easier for you as the business owner or their manager to hold them accountable. And so if it's just an expectation that you set, and it's just a procedure they have to follow, no different than when they have to clock in and out. Maybe you have a procedure for when, how, and when you issue invoices, anything like that. Anytime you can provide your team with a process for them to follow, it makes things a lot easier on them. So I'll stop here and see if anybody has any questions about any of these tips. Otherwise, I can continue. Okay. Now, when talking about asking for reviews, I want to stress that you should never, ever, ever offer money discounts or gifts to your customers in exchange for writing reviews. Okay, there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is the Federal Trade Commission is actually considering a rule that is going to levy a fine on businesses that do offer something in exchange for their customers writing them a review, right? It's against Better Business Bureau's policy. So if you have a review written on BBB and BBB finds out that you are actually asking for something in exchange for the reviews, it's not going to be good. I mean, the best thing that can happen is that review doesn't get published, right? And there's obviously worse things with the BBB that could be a consequence for your business. And then also it's against the policy of a lot of the major review sites out there. So it's against Google's policy, it's against Yelp's policy. And if you're caught, again, the best thing that could happen is the review is not published. But there's, I've seen Yelp put a warning on businesses, letting potential customers know that you as a business have been caught, essentially bribing customers for reviews. And what happens is when customers see something like that, they could come to their own conclusion. So it could just be that 99% of your reviews were written without the promise of, something for free, but the one review that was, and that you got caught for, now everyone's going to assume that none of your reviews are authentic and were all written because they were bribed. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I know you're thinking right now of the few businesses that I'm sure you've come across that you've seen exchanging like a coupon or a free service for a review, and that's fine. But just because other businesses are doing it doesn't mean you should, because obviously those businesses are also in violation of these policies. And sooner rather than later, someone is going to catch on to that, and it's going to affect essentially their online reputation, because it's going to affect the reviews that they already have online, and it might affect their ability to gather more reviews for their business. Now, there is a slight exception to this that I'll mention. And typically there are businesses that do give away a free product. This is very common kind of like in the health and beauty wellness space. It's usually a product that they haven't offered previously, and they give it away for free to select customers in exchange for their honest feedback. And in those cases, the customers that are getting that free product are supposed to disclose that pretty explicitly. And I'm sure you've seen that as well, where, I did receive this product for free in exchange for my honest feedback about the product. So, and I'm not even sure, based on how the Federal Trade Commission wants to rule on that, that's a practice that can continue without some changes to how businesses are supposed to execute that. So just to keep that in mind. But again, long story short, don't ever offer anything to your customers in exchange for writing reviews. Questions about that? Okay. So a couple more quick things here. And this, again, take what is going to be applicable to your business, and you can kind of leave behind what doesn't really apply to you. But I do think that in general, these practices just make it easier for everybody to continue to ask for customer feedback, and for also to make customer feedback an integral part of your business. Because I know we're talking about your online reputation, but also customer feedback does make your business better. And so this kind of, what it does is it integrates the reviews that you're getting from your customers, and you have a system for them as a company, so you know how to address them moving forward. So the first thing that I always recommend is give everybody essentially that has any kind of interaction with the outside world in your company, the ability to request reviews. And I think, again, as consumers ourselves, so, you know, you own a business or you work for a business or you help manage a business, but you are also a consumer. And if you think about when you interact with a business, sometimes it's not the main person that you end up having a, you know, marketplace relationship with that really colors your perception, but maybe it's the first person that you interact with. Maybe it's the person that picked up the phone or the person that greeted you at the desk that affected how you feel about that business. And so that's why I think it's very important to give everyone in your company the ability to request reviews, as long as they're having some kind of interaction with the public. I've definitely seen instances where a customer may not necessarily decide to move forward with a business, you know, for whatever reason. Or maybe they thought they wanted to undertake a, you know, a DIY or a home construction project, and then maybe realize it wasn't the right time. And what ends up happening is they still leave a review for the business, because depending on how much interaction they had, if there was like, you know, a bid that was exchanged or given, that's still a marketplace interaction. And if the person that they talked to, you know, the salesperson was informative and helpful, answered their questions, but wasn't, you know, pushy and was a high pressure individual, that could result in a good review for your business, even if it wasn't somebody that actually paid you money for your services. And in that case, you know, you end up getting a good benefit from that just because somebody in your company had a really good interaction with a potential customer. So that's why I always recommend number one. And number two, I think when I talk about putting one person or department in charge of reviews, again, it really depends on the size of your staff. But I do think it's important to just have one person, if not department, in charge of your reviews, even if that person has other responsibilities, because at least everyone knows that it's going to be that one person that handles it. And what that does is, you know, if you get a negative or positive review, everybody knows that it's going to be this person that handles it. So it's going to be this person that reaches back out to the customer. It's going to be this person that responds to the review, this person that follows up. So it's just easier for everybody to do that. I've definitely seen cases where there's a negative review about a business online and everyone in the business has seen it and is aware of it, but nobody knows who's actually supposed to respond to it. And so no one's responded, no one's taken the initiative to reach out to the disgruntled customer and potentially make things right. And so I think it's just, again, makes everybody's jobs a little bit easier if it's clear who's in charge of reviews. Okay. Number three is holding employees accountable. And again, this is easier to do if reviews are part of your process, because if everybody has to ask for reviews, if everybody has the ability to request reviews, and it's just part of your day-to-day, you know, working with the business, and it's easier to go to somebody and say, hey, you know, I see that you're not requesting feedback that you're supposed to, and talk to them about it. It's a little different if it's not something that they're really expected to do, but you kind of hope that they do for the good of the business, right? And again, the app that is available to accredited businesses, which I will be talking about a little later in this webinar, makes it even easier to hold your employees accountable when it comes to asking for reviews. And so related to that is you can actually incentivize your employees. So I know we talked about not, you know, having any kind of incentives for your customers, but it's completely different for your employees. And so I actually encourage rewarding your employees when it comes to asking for customer feedback, whether it's, you know, rewarding them for asking for the feedback itself or having some sort of reward system for the employee that is getting a lot of reviews. I think it's just better for the company to have not just everyone involved, but to have a reward system for that. And it could be something as simple as, you know, at the end of the week, the person that requested the most reviews gets free lunch, you know, or maybe for every 4 or 5-star review an employee receives, they get a raffle ticket. And at the end of the quarter, there's a raffle for some sort of prize. I think you know your employees best. We've definitely seen this be very effective for some of the companies we work with in terms of having a reward system for their employees. And it's just one more way to kind of get morale up too for your team. So And then, of course, have an effective follow-up strategy, which really relates to having the one person in charge of reviews, where not only are you following up with the people who left reviews, but you're also following up with the people who didn't leave reviews. And again, the app that's available to accredited businesses makes the following up with customers also a lot easier. So questions about that? Comments? I usually get some comments about the don't incentivize your customers. So, okay. All right. So then we talked about how to ask for reviews. So, of course, we also mentioned that 89% of consumers are likely to use businesses that respond to all of their reviews. And so, how do you respond to your review once you receive one? Okay. And I'll make this very simple. A lot of this is going to seem like common sense or very intuitive. And I think if you read some amount of business responses to their reviews online, you will quickly realize that maybe this isn't as common sense as you would think to some business owners. So, of course, like I said, respond to all of your reviews, positive, negative, neutral. It's going to be tempting to respond just to negative reviews, but also respond to your positive reviews as well. If you respond to reviews, depending on the review site, sometimes that boosts them in the algorithm. And so you actually see those reviews first. And it's so easy to respond to a positive review, and it makes people more likely to leave you positive reviews if they see that you're appreciative, right? So, and I actually think that a neutral review is probably the hardest to respond to. But regardless, respond to all of your reviews regardless of the sentiment. And then goes without saying, you would think, but be courteous and polite in all your responses. Of course, it's easy to do that when someone's raving about your business. It's a little more difficult when they've said something not that flattering. And I always remind people that when you're responding to your review, your audience is not just the person who wrote you that review, it's the internet. So your current customers and potential customers are reading your responses, which is why it's so important to keep it professional. And then, of course, the added benefit of responding in such a manner is that is your opportunity to potentially bring back a disgruntled customer, especially if you weren't even aware that they were unhappy with your company to begin with. So again, be courteous and polite. And then somewhat related to that, especially when responding to a negative review about your business, is apologize. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily accepting wrongdoing. And I know in some cases, especially if there's a legal issue that's being worked out between you and a customer, you don't necessarily want to admit fault so explicitly, but you can certainly apologize for the experience that your customer had, right? You can acknowledge their frustration if they were clearly unhappy without saying straight up that it was, it was something that you did. And I think that can go a long way, both with the current customer or the customer that left you that review and your current and potential customers that are reading it. So it doesn't take a lot to say, I'm sorry that you had this experience with our business. I can assure you that this is not what the typical customer of ours experiences. And so I want to make sure that we reach out to you and, and address whatever it is that you're having issues with. Something along those lines can go a long way. Okay. And related to that, don't get emotional or defensive. And again, it's very tempting. I've seen businesses, they've owned this business for 20, 30, 40 years. And it's just within the last 5 years that they've really started to get online reviews. And so, to go from not getting any reviews online to getting that kind of online feedback and having it be instant and immediate can be really jarring for a lot of business owners. And I think their reflex is to defend their business, understandably so. And in that case, I go by the 24, even 48 or 72-hour rule. And while I usually recommend the quicker you respond to a negative review, the better. It's better to wait a little bit longer to respond if your response is going to be a little bit emotional or defensive. You can also treat this more like a Dear John letter. So if you see a review online and you really want to respond to it, just write out a response. Don't do it on the actual review site because you might accidentally submit it, right? But, send yourself an email or write yourself a note on how you really want to respond to that particular review. Give it a day or two, and then actually respond more calmly. And I feel like, that works in a lot of aspects of life. So I don't see why that would not be effective when it comes to responding to negative reviews. Okay. And then, of course, don't go into too much detail or make it personal. You don't want to start a back and forth with a customer online. Again, the audience is going to be the entire internet. Nobody looks good in that situation, even if you think you're trying to prove the customer wrong. It doesn't make you look good as a business. And so I always recommend offering to take it outside of the actual review platform, whether with a phone call or an email or some other way to reach out to them. And of course, if you're going into too much detail, some industries actually prevent that. So obviously the financial industry is under a lot of regulations. If you're in the medical industry, there's HIPAA laws and other types of privacy laws depending on your, state. So just be really careful too when you start to go into a lot of detail when responding back to a customer. And then of course, don't speculate. So there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, if it's not clear why they're frustrated, you don't want to speculate because then you might miss the mark, and then it turns out why they were frustrated to begin with was not what you thought. The other thing is there's a chance that they were not even your customer. So if you don't even really understand what happened, maybe this person mistakenly left you a review. And if that's the case, there are definitely ways to address that. The BBB is fantastic at letting you indicate if you're not sure or for a fact that you did not have a marketplace interaction with a reviewer. Another way to do that is, some review sites have a kind of a flagging option where you can indicate to the review site that, hey, don't think this person meant to review my business and this isn't really relevant. So there's ways to address if you don't think a person was actually a customer of yours. And you can certainly respond stating that, hey, we can't find you in our customer records. Do you mind reaching out to so-and-so or giving an email or a phone number so that we can look into this further? And that's probably the best response that you can have rather than speculating if if the review is less than clear. Okay, and I do see that I have a question. Opinion on commenting on old positive reviews that time has passed. Honestly, I recommend it. I would say that definitely prioritize your more recent review. But if you have reviews that you wish you'd responded to and you didn't get a chance to, you can. And you can even acknowledge that you were late in responding. I think people like to see that kind of honesty and transparency when responding to a review. And so, saying, I know it's been this many months and I'm sorry that I didn't acknowledge this sooner, but we do appreciate you leaving this feedback. And thank you for the opportunity to do business. Something simple like that would definitely go a long way. Now, if you're asking if you need to respond on all your old positive reviews, that really does depend on the volume of reviews, because that could be not feasible if you have like 300 reviews, but then 200 of them are over a year old. So I would say just prioritize on responding on the most recent ones and see how far back you can go. I would say maybe past a year, if you have a lot of reviews that you want to respond to, maybe it's not worth responding past a year. However, if you only have a handful of reviews, then go ahead and do that, because at the very least, it might bring those reviews back to the forefront. And while customers don't necessarily put a lot of stock into a review that's over a year old, it's never a bad thing to have good PR, even if it's from a year ago. So does that answer your question? Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, so this next section, I won't spend too much time on. I know This is really more to show you guys the differences between the different review sites, but it's kind of bulleted, so I don't want to just read off the bullets that you guys can read. So maybe take a screenshot. This is going to be available. I know this webinar is recorded, and I believe BBB is going to make the recording available, but Jenny, please correct me if I'm wrong. And I'll also be providing the actual presentation to Better Business Bureau so they are able to share it with their businesses as well. Okay, now, when talking about review sites, I do want to emphasize that consumers trust Better Business Bureau reviews the most. Of course, BBB doesn't get quite the volume that some of the other review sites does, and Google has pretty much every review site beat in that. Of course, they have the search engine, so it's a very unfair advantage. So of course, they're going to get the volume, but each review being equal, comparing one review to the other, that BBB review is going to resonate with the consumer more. And I actually think that that works out in the BBB's favor because people know, consumers know instinctively that BBB doesn't have a volume of reviews and BBB reviews tend to have more integrity. One great BBB review can have so much more impact than 5 great Google reviews, right? Of course, everything else being equal. So if you think about that, you can really make your BBB reviews count, especially again, since BBB reviews tend to have more influence on the consumer than other reviews on other sites. Okay, and the nice thing about BBB is there is no account required to leave a review. So that's definitely better for your older clientele. I know we have a lot of businesses that their demographic of customers tend to skew older. And so it's great that there's no account required. Pretty much every other review site requires an account. However, just because there's no account required does not mean they allow anonymous reviews. So there are no anonymous reviews required by BBB. And in fact, they have a pretty robust review verification system where they require the customer to verify at least one piece of their customer information, which is great. They also have at least 3 business days before a review is published. And the great thing about this is it allows you, the business, the opportunity to comment on any review you get before the review is published. And what ends up happening is after that 72 hours, and I think, Jenny, do you know what it is for your BBB? I know it's at least 3 business days, but some BBBs I know allow a couple more days than that. Either way, after you have at least 3 business days, once you leave a comment on that review, both the review and your comment are published simultaneously. So again, that's nice because especially if it's a less than stellar review, the customer is seeing the review and your response at the exact same time. Whereas for pretty much every other review site, that negative review is going to have some sort of lead time over whatever your response is. Okay.
And Myra, yes, I believe that is correct. It's at least 3 business days for us as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny. So then you can see here the differences in Google, Yelp, and Facebook. Again, I don't want to go into every single bullet point. I do want to point out that for all of these, an account is going to be required. For Facebook, not every business can get reviews on Facebook. You have to enable reviews on your business Facebook page, just to keep that in mind. And then for Yelp, everybody knows about the Yelp algorithm. And the way that works is Yelp doesn't show all of the reviews that you receive on your main page. Now, eventually customers can see all the reviews that you receive, but they have to click on a link that says reviews not recommended. So essentially Yelp determines which reviews they recommend and which reviews they don't. And only recommended reviews are going to factor into your Yelp rating. And this can be very frustrating for a lot of businesses, especially when it seems like you've only gotten 2 negative reviews ever on Yelp. And those are the 2 that are recommended. And then you have 10 great reviews and none of them are recommended. And so that's what's really frustrating. There's definitely an algorithm that goes into it. We have some kind of best practices when it comes to the algorithm. And if that's something that you're struggling with as a business, please leave your contact information with Jenny and she will pass it along to my team and myself. so that we can reach out to you after the webinar and kind of talk to you about Yelp specifically. Okay, so I will say that just because a review is not recommended to start doesn't mean it can't be recommended later on. And anybody, businesses can respond to both Google and Yelp reviews. The thing about Facebook recommendations is someone else can actually comment on that recommendation, not just the business. So, okay, and again, I'll leave this up a little bit longer just so you guys can take a screenshot or make any notes that you need to make. The notable thing about all these review sites is, unlike the BBB, the reviews are published immediately. And what that means for you as the business is you don't get the opportunity to comment before the review is published. And so again, if it's a negative review, that negative review is going to get posted, and then your response is going to be a little bit delayed regardless, since the negative review is already going to have that head start. Okay, any questions on that? Great. So essentially, this is what I've been referencing the entire time on the webinar, which is BBB has recognized that, of course, reviews are very important to accredited businesses, which is why they've partnered with the Review Solution. The Review Solution is the company that makes the app that is available to accredited businesses to help them get customer reviews. And in this case, specifically, BBB customer reviews, because again, we talked about how important BBB reviews are in terms of, from a customer perspective, that they trust BBB reviews the most, and that a BBB review has an outsized impact when a business has it. So really quickly, this is what it looks like. So when you open up the app, it's just name and number of your customer, and that's your company name. So the number one thing that's I want everybody to come away with is, this is not something your customer has to download. 100% your business downloads it. Your customer doesn't have to do anything. So here you see the business name, they're putting in their customer name, their mobile number, and they're hitting send, and that's it. That's it. So for you, it takes maybe 30 seconds to do that, right? All you have to do is whatever your customer's name is, their cell phone number, you hit send. And it's actually can be even easier than that, because we have a feature on the app that you can choose to take advantage of, where if you give the app permission to integrate with your address book, you can pull your customer's information directly from your phone's contacts. So I know that's very important for businesses that, you know, they either have a dedicated phone to conduct their business from, and so all their customer information is on there. Or maybe for some businesses, they do have their customer information on their personal phone, and that works just fine. And so in here, all you actually have to do is just type in your customer name. Just start typing it in. You get a drop down with all the potential customer names, and you select the correct one. And this actually even cuts down on maybe potentially mistyping their phone number. And so again, at this point, as the business, all you've done is put in your customer's name and their phone number. And then your customer receives that text message immediately. You can see here, the text message is going to have their name. Thank you for choosing your business name, and would you be so kind as to leave us a BBB review? So at this point, your customer hasn't done anything, and all they have to do is click this link. So the only thing that you've left for them is to leave a review. So we've taken away all the steps from the customer. So we talked about asking at the point of service, and when you're face to face with them, asking for a review, walking away and coming back. This is the perfect tool to do that, because again, you're not asking them, you know, okay, well, I'm on BBB, just search my business and you'll be able to find me. That's 2 or 3, maybe even 4 steps for the customer, and they might not even get to the correct, you know, business if you have a similar sounding name to a business, right? So this ensures that they're taken to your business specifically, but it also cuts out all the steps in the beginning, so that all they're required to do is click the link and leave you a review. Okay. And why would you use the app? So obviously, you just enter the customer name, mobile number, hit send. Very easy. Customer, all they have to do is they open the text message, they click the link and leave a review. Very quick and easy process for both you and your customer. the app uses text to send out review requests. And as we know, text messages have a much, much better response rate than emails. Again, think back to your own behavior when you get text versus email and how you treat text in your phone versus emails in your inbox. Okay, and then the thing about the app is we talked about how the BBB has a review verification process, and they make sure that each customer verifies their customer information. What's nice about this is, while of course that's a great feature of the BBB, that can take some time, and it requires a customer, again, to take an extra step. So usually when they're leaving a review on bbb.org, they have to then go into their inbox or maybe their phone and verify their email address or even their phone number. In this case, because you are using their mobile number to send the text, by them clicking the link, it's simultaneously validating their mobile number, so they don't have to do a separate verification step. And again, the more you cut down on what your customers have to do, the more likely you are to get a review from them. And then tracking. We talked about holding your employees accountable and having an effective follow-up strategy. The app lets you see which one of your employees are sending the review requests, and which one of your customers are actually, responding to that reviews. And I'm going to go back one here really quickly and just talk a little bit more about tracking. And when you sign up for the app, or when you get the app, my team and I, or even the BBB team, can talk to you more about this, but essentially every single one of your employees can have a device key that's unique to them. And that's what's going to allow you to track the individual employee activity on the app. What's nice about that is not only can you track which of your employees are requesting reviews like they're supposed to, but you can also see which one of your team members are consistently getting great reviews. A lot of times reviews don't mention who they worked with. So unless you know off the top of your head, Carl Smith worked with Johnny, Carl's raving about your business, but you don't know that it was Johnny that he mainly interacted with. And so what this app lets you do is you can see that it was Johnny that worked with Carl. And so the stellar review that Carl left probably has a lot to do with how Johnny interacted with him and how he did his job. And so one of the things the app absolutely lets you do is track all the reviews that your company, or excuse me, your employees are getting. And so if you have an employee that's consistently getting 5-star reviews, that probably tells you something about that person's performance when compared to the rest of the team. So I did want to point that out. Okay, there is an upgraded version of the app. I won't spend too much time on it. I just want you guys to know that it does exist. If you are interested in that, please you can, send an email to us, or also drop a line to your local BBB and they will pass along the information to us. But all it does is you can get reviews, not just on BBB, but on other review sites. And of course, monitor all your reviews in one place. Okay. And so I think the bottom line, why reviews are so important, is reviews do make you a better business, right? Whether it's telling you what you're doing right and to continue doing, or what you can improve upon, getting the online feedback or getting feedback, period, from your customers is very important to continuing to run a successful business. And so if you're an accredited business and you want to get started with the BBB Reviews app, you can log into your business account or contact your local BBB rep. And if you're not currently accredited and would like more information on BBB accreditation, please feel free to reach out to your local BBB office. Okay, and these are the upcoming events for your local BBB. And Jenny, I take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Myra. Just to let everybody know, the upcoming events that we have on Thursday, we have another webinar in regards to online 101 reviews with Myra. So if you have any colleagues or any other friends who own businesses and stuff that this would benefit from, please let them know. They can still get signed up today for that. March 6th, we have the PrivacyCon 2024. This is featuring the Federal Trade Commission. This is an all-day webinar. We just wanted to let you know that. It's from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. On April 20th, up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we have our SHRED event. And then on September 24th, so save the date, it is our Torch Awards of Ethics Luncheon. Next slide, Myra.
Yep, and
Thank
this is Jen's contact
Yep.
info.
So here's my contact information. If you have any questions in regards to today's presentation and what Myra discussed, please let us know, and I'd be happy to get your information over to her or your questions, as well as if you have any ideas or you would like to see the BBB present on something else specifically, please let me know. Again, I am Jenny Sarkowski, and we greatly appreciate everyone for coming out today and participating in this webinar. We hope you walk away excited to get in there and start implementing the reviews with your business and organization. Are there any other questions before we close out for today? I'm not seeing any. So, all right, also just real quick, thank you, Myra, for your time and your expertise on reviews. It's very informative, and I appreciate all of your help that you do for the Bureau. Lastly, we just have a quick survey here, so if you'd like to scan the QR code, we greatly appreciate everyone's feedback and help, as we are always striving to improve and do better.
Great, yep. And again, thank you, Jenny, and thank you to the Better Business Bureau of Midwest Plains for having me on this morning, and for everybody for attending the webinar live. Thank you all so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you, Myra. Everybody have a good day. See you soon.